Welcome to the FAFSA Leadership Lounge, where we are going to dig into the policy shaping the work of Florida school leaders. I am Michelle White, Executive Director of the Florida Association of School Administrators.
And I'm Jessica Janus, lobbyist for FAFSA and for a few school districts across the state of Florida.
We are so glad that you're here with us, and we're ready to jump right into what's been happening and starting at the federal level this week. And it's a big one, Jess.
Good heavens, yes. As of this recording, we are on day 23 of the federal government shutdown. So at this point, it's like 900,000 federal workers that are furloughed, and another 2 million, including some members of our military, are working but not getting paid. So the questions that we're all worrying about is, why did this happen? And then how does it actually affect education?
And of course, those are really big questions.
So here's the short version. Congress didn't pass the spending bills for the 2026 fiscal year before the September 30th deadline. So when the clock hit 12:01 a.m. on October 1st, the government shut down over disagreements on federal spending, foreign aid, and health insurance subsidies.
So what does this mean for education? First, about 87% of the U.S. DOE has been furloughed. So only essential workers are still on duty. The good news is that student loans and Pell Grants aren't impacted right now. And so students will still see their disbursements and repayments to continue as usual. For our K-12 schools, most federal grants were awarded over the summer, and so districts shouldn't feel too much disruption yet. Title I funding continues, but new grants and guidance from the department are on hold, of course, until things reopen. The one area that is affected is impact aid. And this is the funding that helps districts around military bases or federal land make up for lost tax revenue. So right now, over 1,200 districts across the country rely on that money, and delays could start pinching soon if this goes on much longer.
Absolutely. And we certainly know we've got a number of military bases and some very significant ones here in the state of Florida. So we've got some areas that I'm sure are going to be feeling the pain pretty soon. So the longer this shutdown drags on, the more likely we'll see the Fed tweak their contingency plan. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. Things tend to move extraordinarily slowly at the federal level until all of a sudden they don't. So, we could see something change in a moment's notice.
Sometimes it's a light switch.
Yes.
So, okay, so let's turn our attention back, of course, to the lovely state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our biggest topics during the early committee weeks has been around Schools of Hope, not necessarily for the legislators, but for our districts.
Absolutely. That's one of the fun things about legislative session. Sometimes it's what they're talking about in committee, and sometimes it has nothing to do with what's going on in committee.
Or last year's during.
That's right. Exactly. So for anyone who's new to this topic, the Schools of Hope program started back in 2017. It lets high-performing charters like KIPP and IDEA open schools where there are struggling district schools. The idea was to provide more options in areas where students are not performing well.
And of course, those charters are getting some perks, so to speak, along the way, incentive funding, faster approval, and more flexibility than our traditional schools.
And you probably think, why on earth, when this occurred in 2017, is this now an issue in 2025? And the reason is, during the last legislative session, the legislature expanded the program. They broadened the definition of what they deem persistently low-performing schools. So now if a school is in the bottom 10% statewide on certain ELA or math tests for 2 of the last 3 years, it qualifies. That means, essentially, there are more schools that are eligible to be deemed schools of hope to open nearby.
Absolutely. And the law also gave these charters the right to open just outside the attendance zone if there's no suitable property inside it. So as long as they give preference to students who live in that original zone.
That's right. And also, they have added some new sponsors, which can include now state universities and colleges, not just local school boards. So in last year's budget, there was about $6 million in recurring funding to aid this program.
And of course, this expansion has now raised a few red flags for our schools and our districts.
Absolutely. So as we're looking at this and the potential, and we know there's interest because we talked about the letter that was sent out to many districts, indicating that there was an interest from one particular entity so far, though we expect there to be many more. It kind of put everyone on notice that, okay, we need to look and see what this is going to mean. And there are some serious concerns. One is, of course, just at the very basic level, there's a loss of local control. So this usurps our locally elected school boards and superintendents and their authority and says you have to let this school come in if they meet this criteria. So local control, not so much with this.
Absolutely. So, and then when it comes to funding inequities, critics, of course, are arguing that the program gives charters special treatment, more funding for facilities and wraparound services, while our traditional schools are facing tighter and tighter budgets every year.
Absolutely. And one thing that we focused a great deal on FAFSA, I think, for the last probably decade, if not more, we talked about school safety and had that in our platform. Well, this really brings to light some safety issues as well. So if you're going to have another school on campus with a current district school, what is the access to those facilities? What does that look like? And theoretically, under the way that the law is written right now, a high school could co-locate with an elementary school. Well, typically we don't do that, for obvious reasons of having that old of kids around that young of kids. So what does that mean? What does it mean, even if it's just a co-location between two high schools? What does it mean if you have one student get in a fight with another student and they are attending different schools? How does that work out? So it really does open up a lot of safety concerns, as we've seen the legislature and our school districts work really hard over the last almost a decade, certainly since Parkland. Not that there weren't efforts before that, but obviously that made an increased interest in this issue to make sure that we're making our schools as safe as possible. And if you're changing the accessibility of it, if there are different standards in any kind of way, it's just one more thing to think about.
Absolutely. And when it comes to that facility access and just the capacities that our schools have and whether they're under enrolled or the programs that they have designated to be in certain areas of that school building, this is going to be a big change for some district plans that maybe they don't have in place this school year, but that they're working to build for next school year, right? Like our districts are always trying to think of these creative programs to keep and to attract students into our traditional schools. Now, those could be pushed aside because there's certain requirements that are being met for schools of hope.
That's exactly right. So there is so much to think about. And this is just kind of what's come to us now. I think as we see potentially more interest from more entities to more of our school districts, and then we actually start seeing all this play out, it I'm sure will uncover many other things that there are to think about.
Yeah. And the discussions with parents and the community
Right.
about, okay, they're both at the same school. How do I choose which one my kid is going to go to? And anyway, it's
So much.
these are amazingly large conversations that I know are going to continue through this year. We, of course, haven't seen any legislation that would be filed about it. This is all relating to last year, but we do know there are some that are standing by it. I think we heard from the governor in a press conference that he was standing by the legislation. Mm-hmm. So there's, at least as far as he's concerned, no appetite to change at this point, but more to come about this as session gets underway.
Absolutely.
So that's definitely one to watch. Other things unfolding in Tallahassee is an investigation into the nonprofit Hope Florida Foundation, which we heard about last year. The House took a lot of interest in that. But the subpoenas are out and they may already be convening a grand jury.
That's right. And so the foundation, just to get everyone up to speed, I know we did talk about it a lot last year, but now that it's kind of back in the headlines, the foundation is tied to First Lady Casey DeSantis and the governor's Hope Florida initiative. The issue at hand is questions about how millions of dollars in settlement money that the state received were handled.
So the short version is that the state settled a lawsuit with a Medicaid contractor for hundreds of millions of dollars. And about 10 million from that settlement went to the Hope Florida Foundation.
And then that foundation gave out $5 million each to two other nonprofits. And those nonprofits allegedly passed some of that money to a political committee called Keep Florida Clean.
It's where the questions really start. So, if any of that money was used for political purposes, like fighting a ballot amendment, that's a big problem.
That's right. So, prosecutors are digging in as to whether any laws were broken. And given the high profile nature of this, there could be some serious political fallout.
So, it is a true story about transparency, accountability, and how public or settlement linked funds are handled. And we're going to keep following it.
Absolutely. And it'll also be interesting to see if the House continues any of their work that they started last year that kind of got the ball rolling on all of this. Are they going to take up any of these issues? We shall see.
Absolutely.
So to shift gears now, something new in the legislature, we have seen some bills filed. None of the, as you pointed out, none of our major bills that are coming from committee chairs or anything like that are out yet. Those tend to come out later. But a lot of individual member bills have been released. And there's a bill that has been getting a lot of buzz. Some of our members may have read about it in the newspaper, House Bill 147, which is called Oaths of Classroom Teachers. And it's from Representative Tom Fabricio from Miami Lakes.
And so this bill would require every teacher to take an oath before starting work, basically pledging to uphold the U.S. and Florida constitutions, teach without bias, and maintain academic integrity.
The sponsor says it's meant to elevate the teaching profession, like in his example is like the oaths that doctors and lawyers take.
So not everyone's sold, of course. Teachers already take an oath as public employees, and they're already bound by a professional code of ethics. So some see it as unnecessary or even just political.
That's right. Some folks think it's a nice statement, a reminder about the responsibility that comes with being an educator. We'll see where it lands. It only has 2 committee stops for now, but as we had mentioned, I think in some of our previous episodes, we haven't heard any bills in committee yet. So there's still lots of time.
Absolutely. And I would say to that point, a few number of committee stops usually can indicate to us, hey, we intend to move this forward as quickly as we can and give it the least number of hearings as possible so that we can get it onto the floor.
That's a great point. They do talk about loving a bill to death, and that's when, it gets 4 or 5 committee stops and you just know the thing's never going to make it through because that's just too many committees. And I know that may sound crazy because you think, well, they have 6 committee weeks and then they have session when they have committees. Why on earth couldn't it fly through? Well, when they give it 5 or 6 committees, that's when they don't want it to fly through.
That's right. That's right. So be sure to check out the FAFSA Bill Tracker because we are also now showing you visually where the bills are in committee, which is a great addition to this year's Bill Tracker document. Okay. After all the policy talk, let's kind of end this here on a positive note. Success stories happening across Florida schools right now. So in Broward County Public Schools, one of the biggest districts in the nation, they earned an A rating for the 2nd year in a row, and we're excited to support that.
That is awesome. 96% of Broward schools maintained or improved their grades, and there were 0 D or F schools.
So up in the Panhandle, Okaloosa County, also an A district where 92% of their schools earned A's or B's, and Niceville High hit a 97% graduation rate.
That is amazing. And over in Orange County, the district made gains in almost every tested subject and outperformed the state average in science and Algebra 1.
Well, and Polk County made a big jump too, moving from a C to a B. And Flagler County saw steady growth across reading, math, and science.
Lee County had some amazing turnarounds. Pine Island Elementary went from a C to an A.
That's exciting. And here in Leon County, where the Leadership Lounge is hosted and produced, the district is closing in on that A rating. Superintendent Rocky Hanna credits in strong leadership and community support.
And over in Osceola County, they are seeing great results from tech innovation. Their use of Dreambox Math led to a 2 200% improvement in student outcomes. 200%.
That's amazing. And it's so encouraging to see all of this progress from big districts to small. Everyone is finding ways to lift student achievement, and we could not be happier to celebrate you.
It is incredible. And we'd love to feature your district too. So if you have a success story from your school or your district, send it our way. We'd love to highlight it.
Yep.
So lawmakers will be back in Tallahassee on November 3rd for committee week number 3. So we'll see what happens there. And you can keep tabs on everything on our priorities and other areas of interest and using what we send out, of course, you, and then, of course, at the Leadership Lounge.
Absolutely. Make sure I already mentioned our bill tracker. So head over to the advocacy section of the FAFSA website. Make sure that you are checking the Friday facts each week. Our legislative platform will be hot off the presses, and Monday's news tracker will also have important updates for that week about what committees are meeting and any policy. So remember to share the FAFSA Leadership Lounge, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Michelle White and Jessica Janasiewicz. The podcast was produced by Jeff Willoughby. Original musical recordings by David Higgins. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topics, suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@fasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.